Through the day today, India Today's coverage has been a super smash hit. All the other English news channels put together could not compete with the kind of live concurrent traction that India Today was generating, so much so that we were beating all the Hindi channels as well. So first and foremost, as we start our coverage, from our entire team to all our viewers, a big thank you. On this broadcast, we'll have several senior ministers of the Union Cabinet joining us. We'll have Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, Jyotiraditya Scindia, Rajeev Chandrasekhar. For points of view from the opposition, we'll have P. Chidambaram joining us in just a few moments from now. He's made 9 union budgets. So some of the biggest voices from India Inc., from the government and from the opposition will be joining me on this special post-budget broadcast. Here are the headlines I'm tracking tonight. Finance Minister raises capex spend to a record 11.1 trillion rupees in the interim budget. No changes in direct or indirect taxes.
ये बजट विकसित भारत के 4 स्तंभ युवा, गरीब, महिला और किसान सभी को एम्पावर करेगा.
Jharkhand government in crisis after Hemant Soren's arrest. 22 hours on. Chief Minister successor Champai Soren yet to take over. JMM Congress released a video of 43 MLAs in support of Champai Soren. Hyderabad resort ready to prevent poaching. Hemant Soren to spend the night behind bars after being presented in a PMLA court. ED seeks 10 days custody, says Soren knowingly used scam money. Hours after Varanasi court ordered unsealing of the Gyanvyapi mosque basement, puja performed in the mosque complex. Muslim side appeals to the High Court. Tractors line up the streets of Brussels as farmers surround the EU Parliament. Farmer protests rage across France, Germany, Italy, Poland and Hungary. Government's capital expenditure on public projects increased to a record 11.1 trillion rupees, a massive push on infrastructure. The government wants to lay a foundation for a Viksit Bharat by 2047. In a few moments from now, as I said, some of the top newsmakers will be joining me from the government, from the opposition and from India Inc. to talk about this budget. But before all of that, let me take you through the government's key thrust areas. Gyan, Garib, Yuva, Annadata and Nari. That was the Finance Minister's thrust in her 6th budget. Take a look at this and then we'll get started with all the heavy-duty speakers from the government and the opposition and from India Inc. will be joining me on the broadcast.
An interim budget with no doors, no major announcements in an election year. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman highlighted the government's economic achievements during the past 10 years in an hour-long speech. Stating how the nation had transformed into one of the fastest growing economies in the world, the Finance Minister claimed the government's focus was on Garib, Yuva, Annadata and Nari, or Gyan in short.
Their needs, their aspirations and their welfare are our highest priority. The country progresses when they progress. All 4 require and receive government support in their quest to better their lives. Their empowerment and well-being will drive the country forward.
The interim budget promised 2 crore more houses under the PM Awas Yojana over the next 5 years. She said 78 lakh street vendors have been provided credit assistance. The Finance Minister highlighted DBT transfer of 34 lakh crore rupees to beneficiaries and free ration for 80 crore people.
To help deserving sections of the middle class, and I quote from Honorable Prime Minister's words, living in rented houses or slums or chawls and unauthorized colonies, unquote, to buy or build their own houses.
youth, the Finance Minister stated the government has set up 7 IITs, 16 triple ITs, 7 IIMs, 15 AIMS, 390 universities. 43 crore loans have been sanctioned to boost the youth of India. 1.4 crore youth were trained for skill upgrade and 50-year interest-free loans for investment in sunrise domains was announced that will benefit the private sector.
Hence, the corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low or nil interest rates. This will encourage the private sector to scale up research and innovation significantly in sunrise domains. We need to have programs that combine the powers of our youth and technology.
The Finance Minister said 11.8 crore direct financial assistance has been provided to farmers under the Prime Minister Kisan Yojana. Crop insurance given to 4 crore farmers and integration of 1,361 mandis under ENAM were also the key highlights.
Several other programs are assisting Annadata in producing food for the country and for the world. Electronic National Agricultural Market has integrated 1,361 mandis and is providing services to 1.8 crore farmers with trading volume of 3 lakh crores of rupees.
Further, government is enhancing the target for Lakpati Didi scheme to 3 crore from 2 crore. The Finance Minister also highlighted that 30 crore Mudra Yojana loans have been given to women in the last 10 years. The centre also announced that Ayushman Bharat scheme would be extended to all Asha and Anganwadi workers. The government will also encourage vaccination of girls in the age group of 9 to 14 years to prevent cervical cancer.
Lakpati Didi, 83 lakh SHGs, 83 lakh SHGs with 9 crore women are transforming rural socio-economic landscape. It has been decided to enhance the target for Lakpati Didi from 2 crores to 3 crores.
An interim budget without any big announcements is a sign Prime Minister Narendra Modi is confident of retaining power after the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Nirmala Sitharaman in fact exuded confidence she will present the full budget in July.
In the full budget in July, Honourable Speaker, our government will present a detailed roadmap for our pursuit of Vikasit Bharat.
Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, joining us now at this time is a man who's made 9 budgets, P. Chidambaram. We've been hearing all day from senior ministers in the Union Cabinet. We've heard from the Finance Minister too. And now I want to go across to get a perspective from a man who's been there, done that 9 times over. Mr. Chidambaram, welcome to India Today. I want to start by asking you the government's critique of where you left the Indian economy 10 years of the UPA and where they're leaving the economy. They're saying basically that in the last year when you presented the interim budget, you took 35,000 crore rupees off the budget books, basically trying to do some kind of financial jiggery-pokery, creating problems for later, whereas they're being conservative, they're being clean, they're being clear, and they're being transparent. They're saying you are taking liabilities off the books, they're leaving things far better than anticipated. Instead of a 5.9% fiscal deficit, 5.8 this year, expected to come down to 5.1%. That's their big message. As former finance minister, what's your reading of this interim budget? Mr. Chidambaram, welcome.
You're trotting out numbers without verifying them. What was the fiscal deficit in the terminal year of the UPA and in the terminal year of the NDA? Ask those numbers and look at those numbers. 4.5 versus 5.8. What was the growth rate in the terminal year of the UPA and what is the growth rate in the terminal year of the NDA? More or less the same. What was the average growth rate in 10 years of UPA and 10 years of NDA? If you ask inconvenient questions, the government will say, we had a pandemic. But don't you remember that we had an international financial crisis? That was also once in a century. The last equal financial crisis was in the Great Depression of 1923. Therefore, these are excuses. You hide inconvenient numbers. Let a white paper be returned by an independent body, not the Niti Aayog or the Expenditure Department of the Ministry of Finance. Let a white paper be written by a small body of international experts on India, and let us see whose performance is better. I'm not denying that there is no performance in the NDA government, but the NDA's habit of saying everything in the UPA was black, that India got independence only in 2014, and India got economic independence only when the Honorable Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman became Finance Minister. All that is, according to me, something to be stated to be rejected.
So far, a large part of the growth was coming from capital expenditure by the government in infrastructure projects. This year, however, the government anticipates that the private investment green shoots that we're seeing could pick up even further. You saw the IMF's global macroeconomic outlook. The Indian economy at this time powering 16% of global growth. Would you accept that given all that's happening internationally, the Indian economy seems to be on a very steady glide path for good growth?
Good. I congratulate you on being the one-eyed monarch of the blind. If you want to be the one-eyed monarch of the blind, enjoy yourself. But look at capital expenditure. Look at the 23-24 performance. On the capital account, you promised to spend 10,961 crore, but you actually spent only 9,50,246 crore. It's a good 50,000 crore less on capital expenditure. And where did it happen? It happened at the state's level of capital expenditure. Why? I've spoken to the Finance Minister of Kerala. I've spoken to the former Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu, who was Finance Minister until a few months ago. It's because of the conditionalities that you put that states are not able to spend on capital expenditure. So overall capital expenditure in the current year is 50,000 crore less, not more. So you did not achieve your target of capital expenditure, and that's not a performance that deserves marks.
Sir, given the fact that we have an election coming up a few weeks from now, and you've been Finance Minister heading into polls, the obvious impulse for any government that's election-bound would have been to open the purse strings, roll out the populist red carpet. To her credit, Finance Minister Sitharaman and Prime Minister Modi have eschewed being excessively populist heading into elections. Do you think that conveys a sense of confidence? You know, she said we'll be back in July, we'll present a roadmap for a Viksit Bharat, that they're so convinced that they're coming back to power that they, unlike 2019 when you won 3 states in the Hindi heartland, here they're not feeling the political pressure, therefore they know they don't need to do anything radical, dramatic or overly populist.
Apparently you have short memories. The interim budget was presented by Dr. Manmohan Singh in the terminal budget was presented by him in 95-96. Did he splurge in this last budget? Similarly, other interim budgets have been presented subsequently. Did I splurge in my last budget? Although I was away from the Finance Ministry for 4 years, I came back in the terminal year. Did we splurge in the last budget? you should not take the word of the government at face value, whether it's our government or BJP government or any other government. You should question every statement. That is the job of the media. I am happy that they did not splurge. But that is consistent with past practice also. All right, in one or two cases, they may have splurged. Or in one or two interim budgets, the finance minister of the day may have announced a few things which he either cannot keep or does not intend to keep. But look at the budget speech here. The budget speech promises a whole lot of things, which involves huge expenditure. In the last 10 pages or so, if you will see, starting from page, we don't have hard copies, but the whole section on promoting investments, above that, come to paragraph.
Okay.
57 onwards. 57 onwards, she has promised grand projects. Look at paragraph 59. A corpus of rupees 1 lakh crore will be established with 50-year interest-free loan for tech-savvy youth. Do they have 1 lakh crore? Next one. A new scheme will be launched for strengthening deep tech technologies for defense purposes. Where is the outlay for that? Then next one, 61. Building on the massive tripling of infrastructure. The outlay for the next year has been increased by 11.1%. Do you know the number? Do you know the number? It's an amazing number.
So it's 11,11 crores.
11,111 crore. Is it based on hard calculation or is it astrological inspiration?
No, but sir, numerology aside, won't you accept that if the government is to spend money, then this is, so you would accept fully well that this is where the highest multiplier in the economy is. If the government is to spend its money, spending it on public infrastructure projects is possibly the best way with the highest multiplier for the government to be deploying its scarce resources rather than on wasteful expenses.
No. I am on a different point. You are diverting or you're ignoring it. What is this 11,111 crore?
I'll ask the finance minister that when I get a chance.
What is the rationale for arriving at that number? Obviously, it's an astrologically
It's probably a shub number. That's the only thing that it can be. They probably think it's a lucky number. It could be lucky for the Indian economy, probably.
You can't say that. You can't say that. You are scared to say that. Please, I don't expect you to say that because you are the media, the by and large tamed media. But I'm saying it on your television. This 11,111 crore is an astrologically inspired, invented number. Now, you please ask your next question and I'll answer that.
No, but my question, sir, was on if there is to be an enhancement in government expenditure, would you not accept that this is the best manner in which that money can be spent on public infrastructure projects rather than on wasteful expenditure or just dole-outs? Despite going into an election year and all the pressure about freebies or reveries of the kind that we saw in opposition manifestos, the government says if we invest productively. If we spend money, let it have the highest multiplier for the economy.
Who's denying that? Every government spends on capital expenditure, but I've already pointed out that this government spent less than what was budgeted capital expenditure. Now look at the quality of expenditure. The quality of expenditure, railway officials have put out this data. They are sacrificing or cutting back on ordinary trains, containing second-class compartments, unreserved compartments. Huge number of trains have been taken off the system, and they are investing in Tejas, Vande Bharat, Namo Bharat, which is largely used by the middle class or the upper middle class. I have no quarrel with that. But why are you cutting back on the essential transportation of the poor? That's the question that must be answered. Why are you investing a huge amount of money in a bullet train where several people, several routes, there is massive overcrowding in the trains which run locally or in the backward areas, which is used by the poor people. See, I think, Rahul, you should do a split screen on your television, showing what the poor people use and what the so-called the very rich or the better off sections do.
But Mr. Chidambaram, on a recent flight back from Bhopal, I had the opportunity to ask the Railways Minister this question about bullet trains. His logic and the government's answer is that, we need to have the audacity to think big. When the Bombay-Ahmedabad corridor comes, Bombay-Ahmedabad-Surat become one industrial corridor, it will not just be the money spent on the railway infrastructure, it will have a massive ripple effect in enhancing the economy of that entire zone. They're saying, we're thinking big. The UPA government thought small, incremental. Therefore, India never had a big vision. Therefore, they're talking about Viksit Bharat by 2047. At least that's their pitch and effort.
Wrong again. After Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji announced the Golden Quadrilateral, between 2004 and 2014, the massive build-up of the national highway was under the UPA government. Since then, of course, 2014 to 24, this government has also increased the length of the national highway. There are some problems there. They are counting, they are double counting. The one way is counted as 1 kilometer and the return track is counting as a 2nd kilometer. But ignore all that. But between 2004 and I'm not claiming we started Golden Quadrilateral. Golden Quadrilateral was started by Vajpayee's government. But who built the national highways for 10 years between 2004 and 2014? Why don't you measure those national highways? Who tried various models for building national highway? Did this government come and retrospectively build the highways in the previous 10 years?
Okay.
I've heard of retrospective law. I've not heard of retrospective road building.
We leave it there for the time being. That's Mr. Chidambaram, 9-time finance minister. 9-time he's presented the budget, giving his critique of the 6th budget of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chidambaram, for joining us with your thoughts. To get a response of how the government is looking at what we just heard from the opposition and from Mr. Chidambaram, I want to go across to Senior Minister in the Union Cabinet, Rajeev Chandrasekhar, now joins us, Minister of State for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. Thank you very much, Mr. Chandrasekhar, for joining us. Now, let's take you through what the opposition is saying and get you to respond to the critique that we're hearing of the budget. One, and I'll just have that graph up on the screen, that while there's a lot of emphasis on public infrastructure, so public infrastructure getting a lot of emphasis, but as a percentage of GDP, the amount of money that we're spending, the percentage of money as a part of the GDP that we're spending on education and on health is coming down. They're saying that this represents the priorities of the government, that softer development indices are not getting that kind of priority as much as hard physical infrastructure. How do you respond to that? Minister Chandrasekhar, welcome.
No, Rahul, I certainly don't want to get drawn into this this absolutely nonsensical debate from the Congress party in particular and their UPA-INDI alliance in general. Because, look, what we have done for the last 10 years is a sharp contrast to what they have done in their UPA lost decade between 2004 and 2014. And I heard, bits and pieces of what the former finance minister was trying to spin. Look, the fundamental point today in 2024, as the people evaluate 10 years of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji and the 10 years of the Congress before that, is the following. The Congress UPA inherited, by their own admission in 2004 July, by the same worthy gentleman who was waxing eloquent before me, an economy that was robust, that was in growth, had huge reserves, and was almost a surplus budget. They took that performance, they took the programs of Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, including the Golden Quadrilateral, increasing spending on infrastructure, and ruined the economy, left the economy and the financial sector and the investment space ruined by 2014. There is no arguing about that. These are facts. And I'm glad today the finance minister has said we will publish a white paper. Instead of constantly being sniped at with data out of context and information out of context, it is important for the people of India to understand really what the UPA and the Congress did in the 10 years that they had the opportunity to serve the people. And what really has happened in the last 10 years, taking a devastated economy in 2014, an absolutely broken financial sector which was beset with NPAs and crony lending, with no investments running away from this country, inflation sky high, to rebuild the economy and to take it from the fragile 5 where we were in 2014 to take it to the top 5 and really create a launch pad of economic expansion into the future is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has done. And that is what this interim budget is about. Whether the Congress appreciates whether what we are doing in education, or the Congress wants to measure the amount of outlay that is being provided to one social sector or the other sector, I can certainly tell you, I can give you chapter and verse on how state governments of the Congress have dragged the national average down on employment, on social indices, on women's safety. Rajasthan under the Congress, Karnataka under the Congress, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh under the Congress, how they drag these national averages down. This is an interesting game that the Congress plays. They love bandying national averages without wanting people to understand who's actually the drain and the drag on the national average, which is states that they are in government in. So I don't want to get drawn into this, Rahul. The facts are out there. Yeah.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, the other thing I want to draw you into is a 10-year comparison of the economic performance of the Modi government versus that of the UPA government. Mr. Chidambaram said, look at fiscal deficit. We left at 4.5%, it's now 5.8%. He said, look at growth. As an average for 5 years, we grew faster in UPA 2 than we've grown now. They'll give the example of the pandemic, but we had the economic crisis in the US in the late 2000s, and therefore, his argument is, if you look at 10 years, it's not as if the UPA didn't perform. In your arguments, Rahul, he alleges that the government makes it seem as if the UPA did nothing and they're the ones who are building India afresh.
Look, nobody's saying that. I don't know why he's so deeply insecure that he believes that that's the characterization. What the UPA did was unprecedented scams. What the UPA did was break the financial sector that was left to them by Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government in sound shape. What they did was shatter the economy that was given to them in very strong, high growth shape in 2004. Those are facts. I'm not creating rhetoric. And this is, Mr. Chidambaram has now moved from being a clever lawyer to an unfortunate spin master. When he talks about average growth, what is relevant is not average growth when you were left a high growth economy in 2004. It is what you leave the country with at the end of your term. And they left an economy that was in tatters at the end of the term. And Rahul, all you need to do is go back to 2014, do a Google of all the headlines that described the economy under Chidambaram ji's watch. It was laggard economy, investment decline, high inflation. I am not saying this. You just have to Google and get a view on what the economy was when Finance Minister Chidambaram was the so-called caretaker of the economy. So this type of spinning, trying to spin our average growth was great. If the average growth was great under the Congress, they must thank Mr. Jaswant Singh, who was the finance minister, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was the prime minister. And if we had to start, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji had to start in 2014 with a very, very low base, high inflation, low growth, and a shattered financial sector. We have to thank Finance Minister Chidambaram for it. So these are facts. So no amount of spinning and twisting and turning in the wind will change what the facts are. The economy today in 2024 is poised for unprecedented expansion.
The other thing I want you to respond to is his charge, and borne out by the data, that in the last few months of this fiscal, expenditure has been cut back on capital expenditure, on several of the social outlay schemes. The expenditure has been cut back, which is how instead of ending up at 5.9% fiscal, you're at 5.8, not because of great buoyancy, but because you haven't spent what you'd allocated cutting across different sectors and different schemes, which is how you've been able to show 5.8% fiscal deficit.
Once, and Rahul, I didn't complete this so-called charge of Mr. Chidambaram that our fiscal deficit is very high compared to his fiscal deficit. His fiscal deficit was almost 9%. And even that he managed after cleverly fudging data, and we know this. He knows it. And if he wants to be drawn into a debate on this, we are more than happy to have a debate on what he did to fudge the oil deficit and by stuffing the numbers in the oil marketing company. So I don't want to go down that road. But for somebody today of his caliber and his knowledge to start talking about the fiscal deficit, knowing fully well the world just went through the black swan event of an unprecedented kind during COVID, where 2 years this had a huge, deep impact on economic activity, trade, exports, imports, all of that happened. And he wants us to just believe that that will not have any consequence on the economy and the deficit. Of course, revenues came down for the government, as it did for every government around the world. Of course, the government had to borrow more, as did every government in the world. And of course, fiscal deficit went up during the COVID, as it for every reasonable, responsible government in the world who was responsible enough to look after their people, protect their people with vaccines, protect their people with free rations. This is what a responsible government does. So, I mean, he gives you half the facts and wants people to believe that he ran a superlative economy when the facts and the truth are exactly the opposite. So, and on the issue of whether we spend enough or not, Rahul, spending efficiency today in the Narendra Modi ji government, a 1 rupee travels further than ever before in the history of independent India. Under Chidambaram ji, spending 1 rupee meant 85 paise was siphoned out by somebody, and 15 paise was went to the intended beneficiary. Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, that 1 rupee that is meant goes 1 rupee to the beneficiary. So what is he talking about? For us, it is not about numbers. It is about the outcomes. And governance is about outcomes. It's not about measuring how many million crore of rupees that were spent. In any event, you can see in Karnataka, you can see in Jharkhand how the crores of rupees that are coming out of the contractors and the MLAs' houses in Congress-run governments or INDI alliance-run governments. And he wants us to believe that that is a measure of fiscal performance. Certainly not. I think the people of India realize it is outcomes and how you spend and how honestly you spend, and the corruption-free governance that is behind every rupee meant for a beneficiary, that is the more important measure than saying, I am a finance minister that has presided over 2G scam, Colgate scam, denied these scams ever existed, and then make a case to spend more and more money as and loot it like state governments in Karnataka and Jharkhand are doing.
You've had your say. Mr. Chidambaram presented his critique. Rajeev, Chandrasekhar ji, for joining us. Thank you very much. Appreciate you taking our time and joining us for this conversation. Several more guests joining me in the next few minutes. I want to go across to Dr. Subhash Garg, who's been part of the budget-making process for many years. And this is one of the key areas of argument. 10 years of UPA versus 10 years of NDA. Mr. Chidambaram arguing that, there was a lot that got done and the government trying to disparage the performance under the UPA to make it seem as if nothing happened. And you just heard from Minister Chandrasekhar, as we will from several others in the government, who will say, well, frankly, those 10 years were 10 years of a lost opportunity?
See, it's very good to compare because that's what gives you a long-term sense of how India has developed over the years and performed. Minister Rajeev was talking about Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government and then subsequent movement into the UPA government at that time. I would recall for you, if you go back, Atal Bihari Vajpayee government 2003-04 was a very good, outstanding year. That's what gave birth to the Shining India movement, because at 8%, for the first time we had recorded the real GDP growth of 8%. But again, please remember, before that 2003-04, 3 years of Vajpayee government had very low growth, only about 4% or so. And for the entire 6-year period of Vajpayee government, the growth was only about 5.5%. It was not very massive growth. When you went into the UPA, the economy was super hot in the first few years. The growth recorded by the numbers or the series which we had at that time was 8% plus for 2-3 years together. And the first UPA government of 5 years, the growth performance was excellent. Even inflation performance was very low those times. And that was the only year, 2007-08, when there was revenue surplus in the country. But by the time after the global financial crisis and the missteps which the government had taken at that time of sort of splurging on expanding expenditures, coupled with the misfortune of two things at that time. One was the global rise in agricultural prices, and also the oil prices went through the roof at that time for 2 years. By the time the cycle turned only just when the new government took over.
So it's a mix of your own actions
exactly.
and also a certain amount of luck which is beyond
So a lot
your
of factors
control.
play into it. I don't think you can sort of assign the entire credit or blame
So the
to
truth
anyone
lies somewhere in
particular.
between, you're saying. So I want to go across to Dr. Anish Shah, Group Chairperson of Mahindra & Mahindra, joining us now on this broadcast. Dr. Shah, welcome. From your perspective, how are you decoding the key takeaways from Nirmala Sitharaman's 6th budget, Dr. Shah?
Now, the key messages are that this is a budget that sets up India very well for its long-term growth ambitions around Viksit Bharat. This is a budget that prioritizes economics over politics. It is one that covers all segments of society and therefore is inclusive, but is also has a significant focus on growth and a significant focus on climate.
One of the key critiques of left-leaning economists, members of the opposition, is that rural consumption isn't picking up. In your portfolio, especially when it comes to, for example, tractors, are you still highly concerned, as you were some time ago when we last chatted, about the fact that rural consumption isn't showing any green shoots and there isn't any big spurt in rural consumption, that there seems to be some level of distress which is keeping rural consumers from spending?
So on that, Rahul, it always has to be a longer-term view, because if we look at the past 3 years, if we look specifically at the tractor industry, it has grown very well. In this current year, it's flat to -5% is what our estimate is for the year. But on balance, given the growth we've seen more recently, it's not a bad place to be. So I would say rural is not as bad as a lot of people think. It's actually in a fairly good place. We continue to be optimistic about where rural will be next year as well. And despite some of the challenges we've seen this year in terms of lower rainfall, in terms of crops not being as good as they should have been, I think rural has held up fairly well. And if we look at it from a budget standpoint, we would always prefer, as an industry, a budget that has sustainable long-term growth, that again prioritizes economics over politics in terms of SOPs in any particular area, and that is a very solid positive for the economy.
The other question that's being asked is about jobs and unemployment and whether the budget says enough and does enough to address these two issues.
So if you drive growth in an economy, jobs automatically are a part of it because they have to be part of the growth story. And what we are seeing in this budget is clear focus on growth, also focus on inclusion, and skilling is a key part of it as well. So all of those things, as you put it together, it will drive jobs, because without jobs, this is not going to happen.
The finance minister spoke of a roadmap for Viksit Bharat by 2047 when she comes back in July. That's the level of optimism she was seeking to convey. According to you, regardless of who wins, what does India need to do from where we are right now to actually be able to achieve that vision of a Viksit Bharat?
I think the first is one that is in the budget this time, which is around states driving ease of doing business as well. Now, many states have been doing that, but some of the incentives that have been put into this budget will accelerate that. And that's a very important part, because India stands today in a position when the world is looking at India and is looking at how can we make India our destination. And some are hesitating based on some of the challenges we've seen in India in the past. The central government has been very focused on addressing those challenges and then very aggressive in doing so in a positive way. And the states have to have that same level of aggression in terms of making things easier and attracting investors and manufacturing into India. So that, to me, is one of the biggest areas of focus, which again is very good to see in the budget right now. A number of reforms have taken place, and the key is going to be on continuing to drive economic growth. Manufacturing will have to be significantly higher. To reach Viksit Bharat goals, our estimate is that manufacturing will have to be 16 times what it is today. And if that has to happen, then R&D spend has to be strong, because we've got to be able to make in India for the world. Making in India for India is not going to get us to 16 times. And that, again, is something that's positive in the budget in terms of the R&D spend. So these are some of the aspects that we will have to look at in terms of driving India's economy to get to Viksit Bharat goals.
No, but if manufacturing is to go up in the way that you're suggesting, for that companies like yours and others in India Inc. need to invest a lot more. The government's capex is up only 11% this year. The government is hoping that private investment will take off in right earnest. In all the conversations that you're having at FICCI, do you actually see that happen, or do you think once again there'll be more talk but less action and less actual investment?
Clearly, private investment has to grow, and our capacity utilization has been going up. A number of businesses have deleveraged their balance sheets and are in a much better position today. The consumption story is strong in India. We are starting to make in India for the world as well in a few sectors. And if you put all of those together, that will result in private investment growing. You're right, that has been a softer spot in the last 2 or 3 years. And that's where government capex has helped the economy grow. And it is time for the private sector to step up and invest and continue to drive the economy as well.
That's Dr. Anish Shah, Group Chief Executive Officer at the Mahindra Group, joining us. Thank you very much for taking our time. Rajeev Kumar is now back with us, all suited, booted, looking very sharp. Dr. Kumar, welcome. You know, this conversation that we're having, Chidambaram versus the likes of Rajeev, Chandrasekhar, on 10 years of UPA versus 10 years of Modi, the fact is that we're heading into an election cycle. So this narrative will likely play out. The problem, though, is that both are trying to diss the other. Who do you think, in your analysis, at the end of 10 years is actually carrying the day? Who's winning the economic argument?
Well, I'm clear in my mind that the present government is winning the economic argument. Because what happened, for whatever reasons there were, and we can go into that, I think we today have landed ourselves in a fairly sweet spot. And for various reasons, for all the reforms that have been done, etc., etc. Now, good policies.
No, but Chidambaram said, compare 10 years of my growth, compare 10 years of NDA growth. Look at fiscal deficit where I left it, look at where they're leaving. He says, talk numbers and the picture isn't as rosy as someone like you would say.
No, but you see, the fact is that the Chidambaram, when he made his budget for 2009, I actually told him himself, he had just opened the coffers completely. I mean, the write-off, the debt write-offs of the farmers, the sixth pay commission, etc., etc. The fiscal deficit at that time, I think, jumped up by 1.8%, if I remember correctly. Because I mentioned to him, I said, sir, what have you done? And he said, don't tell me how to do economics. This is the way to do it. See, the point is that there were some good lucks there, and there was also some bad luck. For example, at the end of during the 2013, I think this is what Subhash was referring to, we did end up in a situation, we were really at the precipice of, at the edge of a precipice, and that was the fragile five and the rupee tanking, etc., etc. Similar things, I'm afraid, were done out by Shri Pranab Mukherjee as well. After the 2008 crisis, the kind of response that we had on...
Especially retrospective taxation, who can forget that?
Retrospective taxation. I mean, and the tax rates, the non-transparencies, the kind of, sort of thing that were going on in the last mile delivery, the public procurement, the tendering and all of that. You see, the numbers, yes, I mean, if you take just the averages, but again here, maybe the GDP or average growth rate, etc., whatever. But the point is, my own thinking is that the foundations for a sustained takeoff of 7% plus growth have now been laid. Now, maybe again, one is wrong. We've had this conversation that India is land of perpetual takeoffs, I think it's beginning to happen.
Wanting to take off when thinks that India is all set to take off is Jyotiraditya Scindia, the Union Civil Aviation Minister. So he'll be joining me when we come back after a very quick break. We'll also have Minister Ashwini Vaishnav joining us. We'll hear from members of the government. We'll hear from members of the opposition. Our coverage continues on the other side of a very quick break. Stay with us.
Seats will the BJP get if general elections are held today?
Who would you rate as India's best chief minister?
Do you support the idea of one nation, one poll?
Will the consecration of the Ram temple help the BJP in the Lok Sabha elections?
After Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who do you think is best suited to be India's Prime Minister?
All this and more in the next edition of the India Today Mood of the Nation opinion poll, exclusively on India Today TV.
मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों, आज का ये बजट इंटरिम बजट तो है ही, लेकिन ये बजट इंक्लूसिव और इनोवेटिव बजट है। इस बजट में कंटिन्यूटी का कॉन्फिडेंस है। ये बजट विकसित भारत के 4 स्तंभ युवा, गरीब, महिला और किसान सभी को एम्पावर करेगा। निर्मला जी का ये बजट देश के भविष्य के निर्माण का बजट है। इस बजट में 2047 के विकसित भारत की नींव को मजबूत करने की गारंटी है। मैं निर्मला जी और उनकी टीम को बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं।
The aviation sector has been galvanized in the past 10 years. Number of airports have doubled to 149. Rollout of air connectivity to Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities under UDAN scheme has been widespread. 517 new routes are carrying 1.3 crore passengers. Indian carriers have proactively placed orders for over 1,000 new aircrafts. Expansion of existing airports and development of new airports will continue expeditiously. We have a fast expanding middle class and rapid urbanization is taking place. Metro, rail and Namo Bharat can be the catalyst for the required urban transformation. Expansion of these systems will be supported in large cities, focusing on transit-oriented development.
In politics, everyone has an opinion, but I have the data. Whose stock is rising? Whose graph is falling? Track India's political stock exchange. Unmatched, unmissable data analytics. The only show on News TV where numbers do the talking. India's most credible poll tracker. The Political Stock Exchange with Rahul Kanwal only on India Today.
Economic management. The multi-pronged economic management over the past 10 years has complemented people-centric, inclusive development. Following are some of the major elements. 1. All forms of infrastructure, physical, digital, or social, are being built in record time. Number 2. All parts of the country are becoming active participants in economic growth. Number 3, digital public infrastructure, a new factor of production as if in the 21st century, is instrumental in formalization of the economy. Number 4, goods and services tax has enabled one nation, one market, one tax. Tax reforms have led to deepening and widening of tax base. Number 5, strengthening of the financial sector has helped in making savings, credit, and investments more efficient. Number 6, GIFT, IFSC, and the Unified Regulatory Authority, IFSCA, are creating a robust gateway for global capital and financial services for the economy. Number 7, proactive inflation management has helped keep inflation within the policy band. Now, the global context, Honorable Speaker, sir. Geopolitically, global affairs are becoming more complex and challenging with wars and conflicts. Globalization is being redefined with reshoring and friendshoring, disruption and fragmentation of supply chains, and competition for critical minerals and technologies.
Co-presented by
New Kia Sonet, the Wild Reborn.
Co-powered by SBI Life. अपने लिए अपनों के लिए.
Hello and welcome. Finance Minister Sitharaman, Prime Minister Narendra Modi holding out the promise of making India a developed country by 2047. Is that just political rhetoric or is that achievable? What needs to be done between now and 2047 to be able to achieve this? We'll talk about this on this special hour. I'll be joined by Union Minister Piyush Goyal. We'll have Senior Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia, and my experts in the studio will be joining us to decode Finance Minister Sitharaman's sixth budget, which was an interim budget. But before that, let me take you through the headlines we're tracking this evening. Finance Minister Sitharaman raises capex spend to a record 11.1 trillion rupees in the interim budget. No changes in direct or indirect taxes. Prime Minister says this is a budget for a Viksit Bharat.
ये बजट विकसित भारत के 4 स्तंभ युवा, गरीब, महिला और किसान सभी को एम्पावर करेगा.
Jharkhand government in crisis after Hemant Soren's arrest. 22 hours on. CM successor Champai Soren yet to take over. JMM Congress released a video of 43 MLAs in support of Champai Soren. Hyderabad resort ready to prevent any attempt at poaching. Hemant Soren to spend the night behind bars after being presented in a PMLA court. ED seeks 10-day custody, says Soren knowingly used scam money. Hours after Varanasi court ordered unsealing of the Gyanvyapi mosque basement, puja performed in the mosque complex. Muslim side appeals to the High Court. Tractors line up the streets of Brussels as farmers surround the EU Parliament. Farmer protests rage across France, Germany, Italy, Poland and Hungary. No populism, no freebies, no handouts. The 2024 interim budget was a budget confident of a third Modi victory. Both the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister himself declared that they will bring a proper full budget when they come back in July.
A confident stride. Popularity weighs over populism.
I present the interim budget for 24-25.
The Modi government's economic manifesto before the general elections.
The Indian economy.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman unveiled the interim budget for 2024-25. The Modi government, at the fag end of its second term, rolled out plans for long-term reforms and infrastructure development.
With the whole of nation approach of Sabka Prayas, the country overcame the challenges of once-in-a-century pandemic, took long strides towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, committed to Panch Pran, and laid solid foundations for the Amrit Kal. As a result, our young country has high aspirations, pride in its present, and hope and confidence for a bright future. Are periodically increased.
The interim budget in the Lok Sabha signalled the Modi government's pre-poll assurance of another 5-year in power.
All castes and people at all levels. We expect that our government, based on its stupendous work, will be blessed again by the people with a resounding mandate. An assurance that benefits are delivered.
The interim proposals shied away from populist measures, leaving direct and indirect tax slabs untouched. The Finance Minister instead laid out a vision for the future of the country's young demography.
Farmers are our annadata. For our tech-savvy youth, this will be a golden era. A corpus of 1 lakh crore rupees will be established with 50-year interest-free loan. The corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low or nil interest rates. This will encourage the private sector to scale up research and innovation significantly in sunrise domains. We need to have programs that combine the powers of our youth and technology.
The interim budget presentation for the new fiscal became an occasion for the Modi government to highlight its achievements.
It is now appropriate to look at where we were then till 2014 and where we are now, only for the purpose of drawing lessons from the mismanagement of those years. The government will lay a white paper on table of the House, the challenge of the pre-2014 era.
The finance minister's limited populist pitch included the announcement of 2 crore new houses and the extension of Ayushman Bharat to Asha and Anganwadi workers.
High growth. Healthcare cover under Ayushman Bharat scheme will be extended to all Asha workers, to all Anganwadi workers and helpers.
An 11.11% increase in capital expenditure was announced, focusing on improving railways and air travel.
3 major economic railway corridor programs will be implemented. These are energy, mineral and cement corridor, expansion of existing airports and development of new airports will continue expeditiously. 30.03 lakh crore rupees.
The finance minister's announcement centered around social justice and women's welfare.
Reflecting strong growth momentum, making triple talaq illegal, reservation of 1/3 seats for women in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, and giving over 70% houses under PM Awas Yojana in rural areas to women as sole or joint owners have enhanced their dignity. For our government, social justice is an effective and necessary governance model. The saturation approach of covering all eligible people is the true and comprehensive achievement of social justice. This is secularism in action, reduces corruption and prevents nepotism, prevents Bhai Bhatijawad.
A budget seemingly designed to reveal the Modi government's confidence in a future under its leadership. Bureau Report, India Today.
In a short while from now, we'll go across live to 3 senior ministers of the Modi government joining us on this broadcast. We'll have Union Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia, Telecom and IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, and we'll have Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal. So a heavyweight panel joining us on this special broadcast. I want to get a word in from Dr. Rajeev Kumar, who headed the Niti Aayog. We got Subhash Garg, who's been Secretary in the government and the Ministry of Finance, has been involved in the process of making several budgets. As people tune in this evening, Dr. Rajeev Kumar, what is it that about this budget pleased you the most, and what is it that you think the government and the finance minister could have done differently?
Surprisingly, one of the things that I thought was very good was this setting aside 1 lakh crore of corpus for a 50-year-long,
But Mr. Chidambaram asked, where's the outlay for this? He says you've just kind of mentioned this figure without giving the money.
This is nitpicking, and this will happen. If the finance minister announces that in a budget, this happens. And and not all of that 1 lakh crore is required to be placed up front on the table. But the announcement, the idea behind that, which is to encourage R&D, which is so weak in our country, and then to especially target it to the young, innovators and entrepreneurs, I think that's a new one. I mean, let me put it like this, that's a new one. So that's one very pleasing for me. The other one that I really liked was, the target for creating 3 crore female Lakpatis. And again, I think because that will involve creating female entrepreneurs. And that's a very big one, because that's not just handing out money, that's actually creating entrepreneurs, even at sort of small level. But so those are the two good ones.
Subhashkar, what about you?
So I thought the absence of populism, rhetoric, handouts was a good standout point. Some movement towards fiscal consolidation was also a good positive. The continued emphasis on the capex was also a kind of positive thing. But what was not that good was what was not spoken about. One, the income generation, employment, jobs was completely missing.
So let me explain that. Through the word count, which has now gone viral, a lot of focus on what the finance minister spoke about and what the finance minister didn't speak about. So I'll just walk across the budget intelligence dashboard and show that to our viewers right now. So if you look at the word cloud for this budget, she speaks of the following things most often. She's speaking of taxation 42 times. She's speaking of Prime Minister 42 times. She's spoken of policy 35 times, Bharat 24 times, scheme 16 times, farmer 15, food 11 times. The opposition using this word count to say, but job or employment ki to baat hi nahi ho rahi hai.
And one more thing which I found conspicuous by absence was the big ticket program of the government, the PLI. PLI seems to be performing very poorly. I just did the counting after we dispersed at 2 o'clock. The actual expenditure in 22-23 is 1,000 rupees less than what was decided in the RE, and that itself was at a very low level of 3,800 crores. And same story seems to be continuing in 23-24. Very low disbursement. What it seems to be, except 2 or 3 PLIs, the telecom one and one on the pharma side and some on the food. So just 1 minute. So the 6 years program.
Which ones do you think are not working?
Rest everything is not working.
You think telecom is working?
Only telecom and the pharmaceutical seems to be.
Why are the others not working?
Others, many of them have no takers, and many schemes actually should have been there. Toys, leather, those.
You want to respond to that, Rajeev Kumar? That if you go sector-wise, production-linked incentive is not working in several sectors.
I think it's working. I think it's just a matter of selection of the enterprises and their targets. 3,269 crore is the actual disbursement for 23-24, and the budget has been doubled to more than 6,500 crores for the next year. Now that must be for good reason.
Okay.
That they know that
the allocation, Rajeev, is 1.97 lakh crores over 5 years.
Yeah.
We have not, including the current year, done even 5,000 crores.
That's an important point. I'll put that question to some of the ministers who will be joining us. I want to start with Union Minister for Civil Aviation, Jyotiraditya Scindia, who's joining us on this broadcast. Minister Scindia, welcome. Can you at the outset give our viewers a sense of what to expect from your ministry, civil aviation, in the year to come? What is it that's on the verge of takeoff, landing and delivery? What should viewers really look out for from Minister Scindia this year?
Well, Rahul, thank you for having me on the show. Before I do that, I think just to give you a little bit of an overview and through you, our viewers as well, in terms of this budget. As we all know that this was a vote on account budget. But at the same time, if you call it interim, then it's also an innovative budget and it's an inclusive budget. It very clearly shows the historical path that Prime Minister Modi's government has followed over the last 9.5, 10 years, where there's been a complete transformation of the economic landscape of India. And when I talk about economic landscape, I'm not talking about just the manufacturing sector or the service sector or the agrarian sector, but really down to the grassroots level. When we talk about the fact that 25 crore people have now come above the poverty line, When we talk about close to 34 lakh crores being transmitted through the DBT program directly to people's bank accounts with no leakages, saving of close to 2.7 lakh crore of government reserves in that process by the creation of 50 crore Jan Dhan accounts. So therefore, there's been a transformation both in terms of the delivery system under Prime Minister Modi and a transformation of lives across the length and breadth of our country. When we talk about minimum government and maximum governance, that's what we intend and that's what we mean. And now we are on the path of 100% saturation. And therefore, all the schemes of the government of India must reach the last mile, last connectivity. And therefore, now if you transition on to my both my ministries, civil aviation as well as steel, what we are looking at is a rapid rollout of infrastructure. In civil aviation, as we speak today, Rahul, I have close to about 6 to 8 terminals that are ready for inauguration. Whether we talk about Pune, we talk about Kolhapur, on the back of Ayodhya, which was just done, and Tiruchirappalli, which was just done last month. Pune, Kolhapur, Jabalpur, Gwalior, Lucknow, the Big Bang terminal coming up in Delhi by the end of February, which will take our capacity to 109 million, second largest terminal in the world. That's where India is reaching today. And similarly in steel, augmentation of steel capacity. We've gone from 80 million tons production to 125 million tons, close to about 100 million tons in terms of capacity to 160 million tons, going up to 300 million tons by 2030. And therefore, we are committed down the path. I couldn't help overhearing our panelist before I joined in officially talking about the PLI scheme. I'd like to just inform him that as far as the PLI schemes are concerned, they have resulted in transformational change across industry verticals in India. I can only talk about the 2 PLI schemes under my remit, one under civil aviation, where we have already dispersed close to about 40% of our budgetary amount over 3 years in year 1, close to about 40 crores to 50 crores of 115 crore resource envelope. And we've asked already for a expansion of that PLI for drones. Secondly, in steel as well, the PLI scheme was announced just a couple of months ago. We've had 27 companies with 57 MOUs that have been announced, roughly a resource envelope of about close to 2,500-3,000 crores. I'm following each one of those private sector expansion plans in the specialty steel sector personally on a monthly basis. They're pretty much on track, and we're looking at an augmentation of almost about 20 to 25 million tons per annum in terms of steel capacity, only and only due to the PLI schemes. It has worked wonderfully in electronics, in telecom, and multiple other sectors. So I think it's important that when we look at schemes, there are 2 ways of looking at them. One is the huge fillip that it may have given that sector. Surely there's much more that we can do, but whether it's semiconductors, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's drones, whether it's specialty steel, we're now looking at VAS. We're looking at value-added manufacturing, value-added services, which was never the case in India. We were more of a commodity-producing country that would sell commodities at their base price. Now we're looking at value-added, where the margin becomes much higher on a global scale.
Minister, how do you respond to the critique, especially from the Congress party, that while public infrastructure spends are going up, spends on social sector, spends on education, spends on healthcare as a percentage of GDP relative to the past have actually come down, that these somehow, just by actual allocation, aren't as important as they used to be in the past? There it is on your screen, both education and healthcare now getting much less percentage of GDP allocation than in the past.
So I think that those who have never seen transformation on this scale, those that have always talked about 100 rupees being remitted from Delhi and only 15 rupees ending up in the Labharti's account, are the last ones that can talk about efficacy or allocation. The very fact that today you're seeing, if you look across schemes, PM Kisan Samman Nidhi affecting 11 crore 80 lakh farmers, close to about 2.8 lakh crores being transferred straight directly into their bank accounts. Ujjwala Yojana affecting 10 crore women. When you talk about Ayushman card, almost about 28 crore today Labhartis of of Ayushman card, 77,000 crores being spent over the last 9.5 years. Where were these kind of numbers during their time and their period? You talked about outlays, but you never talked about outcomes. And the finance minister very clearly in her budget has said that we are not an outlay-driven budgetary system. We're an outcome-driven. And those outcomes today, Rahul, are in front of you. When we talk about the fact that you talk about PM Awas Yojana, we built close to about 3 crore houses in 65 years. We've now built 4 crore houses in the last 10 years, and we've committed to building another 2 crore houses over the next 5 years. Those are the kind of targets that we are looking at. And that is why there is trust and belief in Modi ki guarantee. Because people of India today know that when Prime Minister Modi gives a guarantee, then that's a guarantee that that guarantee of PM Modi is going to be fulfilled. And you're seeing translation of that. We have never seen these numbers before. President Macron, on his recent visit to India, was fascinated by the fact that in Jaipur and near Hawa Mahal, when the Prime Minister went and bought a cup of tea for him on his mobile system and on the basis of Chai Pe Charcha and on the basis of the UPI system, where immediately a payment was done through the mobile system. And now he's asked for that technology to be taken to France. We never manufactured COVID vaccines before. We had 2 vaccines manufactured in India, and we were transporting it to 110 countries through Vaccine Maitri. This is a new India. It's a new India that unfortunately the opposition cannot stomach or come to terms with. But it is a new India that has today risen from an aspirational desire of every Indian to really onto the world stage.
But Minister Sindhia, your
that's
former
the new
colleague,
India, the formidable India that Prime Minister Modi represents.
Ex-Finance Minister P. Chidambaram was with us a short while ago, and he said, look at growth 10 years under UPA, look at growth 10 years under NDA. He says, look at where I left the fiscal deficit, look at where the fiscal deficit is now. The accusation is that the BJP government overplays everything that's happening on their watch and completely dismisses any growth that may have happened in the watch of other governments.
Mr. Chidambaram is a very accomplished Harvard lawyer. It's difficult to constantly argue with him, but if I may be in trying to be in all my humility, I've had a background of being a Harvard economist. Sorry?
I'm saying you can't critique Harvard since you studied there as well. But go on.
I just said that. I said that if I can humbly submit that I'm a Harvard economist. So therefore, the problem with Mr. Chidambaram is that he looks at fiscal deficit numbers and he forgets economic theory. And economic theory tells you, whether you look at Keynesian theory or otherwise, that fiscal deficit in itself is not a bad thing, as long as you are spending today on capital expenditure that will yield results tomorrow. And that's what's happened under this government. From a 3 lakh crore capex program of the UPA, you've now ended up at 10 lakh crore capex program for this year going to 11,111 crores for next year. The country has never seen this kind of public investment in its history of 75 years. And therefore, this CAGR of public investment is what is powering today private investment to come in as well. Because private investment understands that the government is putting its foot forward, whether it's highways, whether it's ports, whether it's airports, whether it's railways, whether it's telecom. And therefore, it's ushering in private investment. One of the major issues we have in our country, thanks to the last 65 years of their government, is high logistic costs. Our logistics costs are close to about 12%. And today, our imperative under Prime Minister Modi, his Gati Shakti program, is to be able to lower logistics costs down to 6 to 7%. And therefore, this huge spend on metros, on highways, because we have to get integration of India. We have to get goods from one end to the other. We've got to be able to export. We've got to be able to import raw material, take it to our factories. That's the whole prerogative. And unfortunately, the Congress is still caught up in a time warp of fiscal deficit logic, which doesn't apply to the current government model of spending on infrastructure, as opposed to their deficit numbers that were implied completely by expenditure on the revenue account. And many hidden subsidies that were never displayed on their deficit numbers, such as the oil subsidies. And that has become completely transparent and accountable today. We've taken it on the chin and showed it in our first 2 years, almost about 8 years ago.
Now, you've been focusing a lot on regional connectivity through the Udan scheme, Minister. And anecdotally, it seems that while some of these new airports are readied, initially we have a flurry of flights on those smaller airports. After a while, for various reasons, and I want to draw you out on this, those flights seem to cease. And then they say, हाँ अभी होगा, अभी तो नहीं है. Is that something that is concerning you, that you get these new airports going? I don't name any one or two particular airports, but anecdotally and from people who have spoken to, this seems to have happened in a few places. How do you ensure that these new regional airports that you're building actually have regular, assured connectivity and not in fits and spurts?
So, Rahul, I'd love to spend a session on this with you alone. There is so much of concoction of facts that is going on with this argument that, again, the opposition is laying out. Almost about, if I recall correctly, 8 or 10 months ago, I rebutted all of the points that had been put across. We have built 76 airports, heliports, and water drones under the Udan scheme. All 76 were connected. Of the 76, we've had close to 519, because I inaugurated Dehradun-Pithoragarh yesterday with a 19-seater plane, which the CM himself flew in to Pithoragarh. 519 routes that have been operationalized. Under Udan, you have a viability gap funding model for 3 years. It's a limited period with a sunset clause. If there wasn't a sunset clause, you'd be critiquing me for that. So there is a sunset clause. But I'm very glad to report to you that even post the sunset clause, close to about 30% of the routes are now still plying, which means what? That you build an airport, where there was never an airport, or if there was one, it was prior to World War II. You then seed a flight with the viability gap funding. You then start getting anchor customers in terms of people who fly. Over a 3-year period, it then becomes sustainable on its own, and it still carries on. Almost 80 to 85% of our airports that were built under Udan are still fully connected through either flights that are carrying on over their 3-year period, or those that have completed their 3-year period but are viable in their own right. And many airports are connected now with not only your big ATR and your Boeing 737 and Airbus 320, but I've, as you know, looked at a new Udan schemes squarely and fairly only for helicopters and only for small planes. And by small planes, I mean sub 20-seater planes. So therefore, cities like Jamshedpur, cities like some cities like in Orissa, Pithoragarh and Dehradun, I've connected with 19-seater planes because I'm also looking now at last mile connectivity in a hub and spoke model. And therefore, the demand for civil aviation is growing at a huge double-digit CAGR. We had 6 crore flyers in 2014. Pre-COVID, we had 14.5 crore flyers. Last year, I closed at 15.2 crore flyers. And I'm forecasting that by 2030, we will have 30 crore domestic flyers in this country. That's the kind of scale that you're looking at, which is why now you're building bigger metro airports. Goa was the first city where you had double airports. Now you're going to have Mumbai with Navi Mumbai. You're going to have Delhi with Jewar coming up. Delhi airport itself will be the second largest airport in the world. So you're at this, while you're creating the big hubs, you're also creating all the spokes, going off into a Pithoragarh, into a Jamshedpur, into a Jharsuguda, into a Rupsi in Assam, into a Kishangarh in Rajasthan, into a Darbhanga. So that's the model that we are creating as we go forward.
Okay, we leave it over there. It's an aggressive plan and we wish you all the best for the rollout. Thank you very much, Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on this interim budget. Much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So that's the Union Civil Aviation Minister talking about the massive infrastructure push. And this really, especially in areas like the Northeast, which have had such poor and limited infrastructure when it came to aviation or even railways, are actually seeing massive uplifts of the kind that India hasn't seen in decades.
Yeah. And Rahul, much needed, because having observed China, once the per capita income crosses $3,500 and $4,000 dollars per year, the air traffic actually gets another huge fillip. And therefore, what he's saying about 30 crore, flyers, in 2030 is very much on. And I think before that, we need all the infrastructure, airport facilities that we can get hold of. And this is the reason for which the Indian carriers have ordered more than 1,000 planes, on Boeing and Airbus. So, aviation, is going to take off. And with it, will also come a lot more multiplier effects on tourism and on other services.
And you can go to parts of your country on holiday where it was otherwise very difficult to get to. Nainalal Kidwai now joins us because one of the key tent poles of whether India succeeds at the speed at which the government hopes for or not is the level of enthusiasm in private companies when it comes to fresh investments. Nainalal Kidwaiji, your sense of the level of interest in India to go out and invest in the India story away from the words when it comes to actual implementation and actually opening their purse strings?
So there is no doubt in my mind that India as a growth economy is attracting interest. There are very few economies, it goes without saying, that are growing at the rate we are. And because of that, India is and will attract attention. We also know that because of the China Plus One as not necessarily an alternative, but an addition to China as a global supplier, India will and continues to be looked at. I believe that if we are to look at what we are doing here, and logistics figured very high in the interim budget. Logistics has been a bone of contention for many of the investors here because of the costs it takes to move goods through our country. This has rapidly been coming down, and the continued focus, whether on rail, road, and transportation, and the productivity that happens with that logistic investment, the interim budget furthers that mission, is only making India more attractive and taking care of some of the bones of contention that have existed in the past, namely productivity.
Do you see this actually come down, Dr. Garg? Logistic costs which could make India more competitive?
Of course, logistics is extremely important for the mercantile
logistic costs coming down at the speed at which they should?
We don't have good data to support it. There's been a recent paper which has been put out by the government side that our actual logistics costs were not around 12%, which was claimed earlier. It's about 8 to 9%. but that has to be seen in the context. What do you define as part of the logistics? What is coming down where? At this moment, to my mind, we are more doing the logistics building up through Gati Shakti, otherwise the multi-modal. So that part, we have to make this or that investment into the transportation, storage, warehouse and other kind of things. That part is going on. It will take some time and ultimately the cost should come down.
Okay. Nainalal Kidwai, as far as government capital expenditure is concerned, it's 11% up. Were you assuaged by the fact that the finance minister didn't really go out on a reckless populist spree, given the fact that this was election year, elections being announced just in a few weeks from now? That would have been a big concern for anyone, really.
I think it was, Rahul, and I thought that, that it would be hard for them to even stick with the 5.3, although I think there was speculation that they might even try 5.2. But to come in at 5.1% commitment in an election year has to be lauded as responsible behavior. They could have easily got away with the 5.3 they had earlier committed, and economists and others would have been comfortable with that. So what we're seeing here is fiscal profligacy being contained. The desire to chuck a lot of money at people has not indeed played out. And instead, what we're seeing is building blocks for development. And I do think that emphasis on the women programs, bringing forth the successes of the self-help group movement, which is truly amazing. 83 lakh self-help groups, 9 crore women beneficiaries, continued focus in that area. These are the sort of building blocks as we go forward that enable economic engagement of women at the rural level in the growth of the country. And it's a very important building block. And likewise, youth and startups, there's been a lot of focus there, in both in terms of the new fund which has been announced, which I think is much needed. We have struggled with local venture capital type of money. We've relied too much on money that has come from abroad. And to provide this funding, which is interest-free, can be up to 50 years for startups in the more sort of futuristic sectors, is really very, very welcome. And I think is another indication of the commitment that India is making to the startup ecosystem.
Dr. Garg, how do you respond to the criticism from the likes of Mr. Chidambaram and the others that the manner in which the fiscal deficit is being kept under check is actually by spending much lesser than what the budget estimates were? That the announcement was for higher spends on capex or on social sector schemes, but the actual spends were lesser, and that's how the fiscal deficit appears to look under control.
No, the fiscal deficit reduction for the current year is not very much. It was 5.9, it is 5.8 now. And if you go into the further numbers, it's actually 5.84, very close. If you done it, it would have been 5.9. So that's not much control. But what perhaps he was referring to, that the capex, which was suggested to be about 10 lakh crores, has come down by 50,000 crores. But there is also reduction on the revenue side for the next year. Actually, that is where what surprises me, in fact, is that the revenue expenditure is not gone up to the extent of even what the interest expenditures are going. So interest is going up by about 1.5 lakh crores, but revenue is going up only by 1.1 crore. So there is squeeze on the revenue expenditure as well. So, but you are in a very difficult situation because you're already at very high fiscal deficit situation. So whichever way you can bring by raising revenues or containing the revenue expenditure or not expanding the fiscal, the capital expenditure that much like it was done in a couple of last 3 years, I think that's fine. It's not by sort of not expanding. I don't think government would have loved to save 50,000. Perhaps it was not able to spend, that's why it is there.
Okay, sure. That's also something to look at more from a practical side. It's not like they're trying to scrounge money, it's just that maybe they tried to spend but couldn't. I'm going to slip into a very quick break right now. We'll have a lot more for you when we come back on the other side. Stay with us. We're back in a moment.
Wash Electronic Seat by Kohler. Wish everything was this intelligent.
Get ready for an immersive journey into the heart of news, politics, and insights that matter. Join India Today now on WhatsApp. Scan the QR code.
Sveda by Kohler. Wish everything cared for your skin.
Get ready for an immersive journey into the heart of news, politics, and insights that matter. Join India Today now on WhatsApp. Scan the QR code.
Colors by Kohler. Makes you wish everything was as vibrant.
Get ready for an immersive journey into the heart of news, politics, and insights that matter. Join India Today now on WhatsApp. Scan the QR code.
Pure Wash Electronic Seat by Kohler. Wish everything was this intelligent.
Get ready for an immersive journey into the heart of news, politics, and insights that matter. Join India Today now on WhatsApp. Scan the QR code.
Sveda by Kohler. Wish everything cared for your skin.
Get ready for an immersive journey into the heart of news, politics, and insights that matter. Join India Today now on WhatsApp. Scan the QR code.
Colors by Kohler. Makes you wish everything was as vibrant.
How many seats will the BJP get if general elections are held today?
Who would you rate as India's best chief minister?
Do you support the idea of one nation, one poll?
Will the consecration of the Ram temple help the BJP in the Lok Sabha elections?
After Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who do you think is best suited to be India's Prime Minister?
All this and more in the next edition of the India Today Mood of the Nation Opinion.
The Modi government is holding out the promise of a Viksit Bharat, or a developed India by 2047. Nana Lal Kidwai, you worked in India, you worked abroad. Is this, given how things are at this moment, a promise that you think is achievable? Or do you think this is more in the form of political rhetoric? Because Viksit Bharat is not just about the size of our economy, it's also about ensuring that every Indian is at a certain basic level of income. Can we be a Viksit country by 2047?
Oh, I have no doubt that we will have to be. And it is indeed going to be the demand of our citizens to make sure we are there. There is no doubt also in my mind that the government is seriously committed to this. I see this in some of the work we do at the India Sanitation Coalition in water and sanitation. And there is an absolute commitment to make sure that no one is left behind. In fact, just picking up on that last point, in terms of absorptive capacity of the country to absorb the funds that are put into these systems, we have now in a program with the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, where we're bringing in the private sector to ensure that model villages happen. Because what the ministry is saying is we have put the money into the system. We now have to rely on states and gram panchayats to actually implement. And the implementation is not happening at the pace that we would like. So we want partners from the private sector, not for their money, but to ensure that the money is spent to create the model villages, which we want, that have water, sanitation, wastewater, plastic waste management, and that they tick all the boxes to become the model villages we would like them to. And this is called the Lighthouse Initiative. So very serious efforts on the government's part to ensure that states pick up on these programs so the funds that are allocated don't lapse. And I think this is what we have to continue to focus on, not just money that's allotted.
Do you think this is achievable, the idea of a Viksit Bharat by 2047?
Achievable, but will require very hard work. Because India, Rahul, would be the only country in the world history to actually grow exponentially and also reduce its carbon footprint. Nobody else has done it. So what it requires is hugely innovative thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, and very bold thinking, and also all of us coming together. So that development is not just the government's job, but it also, it converts into a sort of a people's movement only then. So, but the numbers are there. If you look at the CAGR, I mean, if you can grow at 9%, per annum.
But we're not growing at 9%.
No, we are not. But if we can, and countries have done that for 3 decades.
No, but right now the government seems settling around 7.
No, but that's what I'm saying. If you settle at 7, but then, you see, the other thing comes around that if you take Viksit definition as in terms of PPP terms, then of course it is achievable. Because in PPP terms, getting to $20,000, $25,000, which is the definition of a, of a developed economy, the OECD, you can do that. Surjit Bhalla has shown that. I don't want to go there. But, to get but the other option, Rahul, is to provide to the country, to provide to the people the OECD levels of human development indicators at much lower per capita incomes. That to me also is a good definition of a developed economy, and our Kerala model shows that it can be done. Now, that again requires a reimagination of what I now call a gross welfare product.
What's your sense, Dr. Garg? At 7%, which is what is looking achievable in the immediate midterm, are we headed towards becoming a developed country by 47?
We should define what we mean by Viksit India. This is not done. Unless we know what it is.
Like a per capita income of at least $20,000.
Correct. So something like this. We have a criterion. The World Bank does classify the economies into low, middle, and the high income.
20,000 is the
So high income today is about $14,000 per person. We have at 2,500 or so. There is a long gap. There are 87 countries in the world which are in high income bracket already. We need to be there. It's our rightful ambition to go to that. But if you adopt that as a goal, that we will have the cutoff of the high income as the definition of the Viksit Bharat, then we can plan to go there. But it's not an arithmetical sort of calculation that we can, if we grow at 8% or 9%, the whole thing, 25 years or 30 years is a very long time. The world changes. If you go back 25 years from today, we are in 2024. If you go to 1999, what was the world at that time?
Okay, so let me put that question then to one of the key ministers in the Modi government. Piyush Goyal now joins us, Minister for Commerce and Industry, and the conversation, Minister Goyal, in the studio is about achieving the target of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. The question was about whether there is a definite sense of what the definition of a Viksit Bharat is and the level of confidence in government to be able to achieve that target by 2047. Before this, no government in India has spoken about making India a developed country in a fixed time frame. This target being laid out for the first time. So the question around how do you define what Viksit Bharat looks like and what's the roadmap to get there? Let's start from there. Minister Goyal, welcome.
Thank you, Rahul. And I'm sure as a business editor also of Business Today, you jolly well know that no plan can ever be achieved unless you have a target, you have a vision to achieve that target, and you have a roadmap how you're going to get there, and a commitment to achieve that. And I would think it's always good to work to a plan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has steadfastly, whether as Chief Minister of Gujarat or as the Prime Minister of India, always worked very sincerely in every project that he took up with a commitment to achieve results, a focused effort, huge amount of monitoring, holding people responsible for performance, transparency in his work, technology as the backbone of whatever actions he takes, innovative ideas being implemented on the ground, and saturation without any discrimination so that every section of society rises as the country grows. And I think that's the calling card of Prime Minister Modi. 10 years of consistent good governance, 10 years of improving the lives of the poor, 10 years taking the country from fragile 5, which we inherited, high interest rates, high inflation, low foreign currency reserves, very poor morale of the people, daily corruption scandals, high-cost borrowings even to sustain the rupee with foreign exchange loans being taken. From that situation to 2024, where we have a strong foundation on the back of which we can aspire to be a developed nation. The roadmap is clear, the foundation is in place, the vision is crystal clear, and India will be a developed nation. India will be able to take care of its people. India will be able to provide opportunities to 1.4 billion Indians. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind. And I think the nation today trusts that Modi hai, to mumkin hai.
I want to get you to take our viewers through your outlook for exports and imports. And on the budget intelligence dashboard, I just want to show our viewers where things stand at this moment, and then the minister can take us through what he anticipates will happen in the next year, given especially all the geopolitical tensions that we are seeing and the multiple crises, Russia, Ukraine, in the Middle East. So here is exports. I look at total exports to begin with, 776.5 billion in FY23. Till December, 565 billion. If I look in particular at services, services exports, here's the graph coming up from the last 5 years, 325 billion in the last fiscal at 247.9 till December 23. I look at imports just for a moment, and I look at total imports to begin with. As far as total imports are concerned, 896.1 billion in the last fiscal, standing at 634.4 billion till December 23. So let's start with exports, Minister Goyal. Given all the tensions internationally and the move away from hyper-globalization, your outlook on India's export story?
First of all, I think your figures need to be corrected. Your services figure for December may not be exactly the right figure. You may like to check that out, point one. Because the December figure has not come out also as yet in the public domain. I think we'll have to wait till you get the exact figure. But having said that, irrespective, by and large, despite all the geopolitical tensions internationally, despite the Red Sea crisis that we are facing right now, our exports of goods and services is roughly flat. We are about $10 billion short as of December. In terms of trade deficit, we've seen a significant improvement as of December. From a trade deficit of over $108 billion, we are, I think, down to somewhere around $65 billion. So I think the situation after the scorching pace of growth of 2 years, where we grew from 490 to 776, which is a 55% growth in only 2 years. It's not really practical to expect that same scorching pace of growth year on year. And I think despite this troubled global geopolitical situation, where we are today looks to be a very good sweet spot for the country. And I'm very confident that we are well on target to go to $2 trillion by 2030.
$2 trillion by 2030, you're saying. I want to draw you into the social sectors. One of the critiques the opposition is flinging your way, Minister Goyal, is about how there is a lot of spending happening on public infrastructure, but their charge is that education and healthcare as a percentage of GDP are receiving lesser outlays than in the past. Their accusation is that on these social sectors, not enough emphasis is being made. How do you respond to that, Minister?
Well, I think it's so sad that some of my friends in the opposition cannot see the reality on the ground. Of course, in terms of the fast pace at which the size of the budget has grown, the percentages are not as important as the absolute number. And in absolute number on every one of the sectors, we see significant growth, point one. Point two, in terms of social spending or welfare spending, I think what this government has done in 10 years is unprecedented. When you had governments which came and went, they never could see that people of India, especially the women, deserve toilets in their home. 110 million toilets have been built so that every home gets a toilet. People would see, I would see my own grandmother cooking on a smoke chula from morning till night. But somehow governments could never recognize and respect the need for everybody to get a cooking gas connection. We made sure that 100 million homes got a free cooking gas connection under Ujjwala and many more in the regular non-Ujjwala category also. Whether it's 40 million homes being built for the poor, effectively 200 million people getting a good pakka home, and these 40 million families in a way becoming lakpatis, or it is 800 million people being given free food grains. I mean, I can list out a plethora of schemes. Almost 600 million people getting free healthcare. The fact that healthcare facilities during COVID were upgraded across the country, and now we have so many more medical colleges, so many more medical seats, so many more engineering colleges, AIIMS. I mean, the entire country's ecosystem, which will help India become a developed nation, has been given a big fillip in the last 10 years, along with maintaining fiscal prudence. We had planned for 5.9% of the GDP as fiscal deficit. We are at 5.8. So in every respect, this government has demonstrated resilience, has been able to withstand global shocks, and has been able to balance Garib Kalyan, Sushasan, and economic prosperity.
You know, incidentally, I want to remind our viewers that Minister Piyush Goyal was the interim finance minister in 2019 when the last Modi government presented the budget weeks before elections. And if you remember, at that time, there was the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, which came out with an annual expenditure outlay of 75,000 crore rupees, a full tax rebate to those having a taxable income up to 5 lakh rupees. Standard deduction was raised from 40,000 to 50,000. Several measures were taken, none of which have been seen this time round. Is that at some level, Minister Goyal suggested that this government is highly confident we'll be back in July. Abhi karne ki koi zarurat nahi hai. You had presented soon after the BJP was defeated in 3 state elections in the Hindi heartland. So the government at that time potentially was under more pressure. Now you're feeling more confident that, okay, once we come back in July, tab dekhte abhi we don't need to press any panic button or open any populist purse string.
Rahul, first of all, I'll just correct you. The PM Kisan Samman Nidhi was a part of our spending in the then current year, 18-19 itself. So it was launched from December of 18 within the resources of the 18-19 year. And therefore it was, maybe it was announced in the interim budget, but it was a part of a decision taken for the then current year, and resources had been provided for that. So I don't think that the interim budget made too many changes. There were a few changes, some simplifications. Even the 5 lakh scheme, if you recall, was a measure of simplification so that the people get a simplified tax regime also with some benefits. So I think the effort has always been and consistently been to take benefits to the people of India. The form of benefit may change. So this time around, the investment of 11,000 crores on infrastructure is going to provide huge benefit to the middle class, to the common man. After all, it provides opportunities and demand for goods, for services. It provides work opportunities for millions and millions of people. At least a third of that money goes straight into people's hand as wages and salaries. So nearly 2 crore families will benefit directly from that 11 lakh crore rupee investment. Apart from that, the multiplier impact of infrastructure investing. So you'll have steel, cement, electricals, furniture, carpets, all sorts of things. Jobs being created in that. These people who get work or jobs also becoming consumers. So demand again growing. So Make in India getting a fillip. With greater Make in India, greater economies of scale, we become competitive in the international market. PLI supplements that. So it's a very holistic planning that Mr. Modi does, and it is that holistic planning which will make India a developed nation, rest assured.
Thank you very much, Minister Goyal, for joining us. Much appreciate your time. That was Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal. With this, I'm out of time, and I want to hand over to my colleague Rajeev Sardesai. Rajeev.
Presented by JK Tyre Ranger Series. Stay wild at heart. Co-presented by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Co-presented by
New Kia Sonet, the wild reborn.
Co-powered by
The bold look of Kohler.
Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today, your primetime destination for news, newsmakers, talking points. The big talking point, Jharkhand is still without a chief minister. The governor is keeping the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha waiting. What is he up to? We'll be joined by JMM MP in a moment. Mahua Maji will join us. Also, Modi-nomics versus Manmohan-nomics. On a day when the interim budget is out, we'll have 2 fine voices taking each other on. Shashi Tharoor versus Jayant Sinha is our big face-off tonight here on the news today. We'll also have other special guests joining us. But first, as always, it's time for the 9 headlines at 9. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman stays away from any big bang announcements in the interim budget, makes no changes in direct or indirect taxes, raises capex spend to 11.1 trillion rupees. Prime Minister claims the budget is for a Viksit Bharat. Opposition calls the government's interim budget lukewarm, even as Nirmala Sitharaman expresses confidence of delivering a full budget in July, a sign that the government believes it will get re-elected in a few months. Over 24 hours on, uncertainty in Jharkhand as the governor keeps new chief minister-elect Champai Soren waiting. 43 JMM Congress MLAs announced backing for Champai. JMM-led alliance MLAs flown to Hyderabad now in another version of resort politics. Hemant Soren in one-day judicial custody. ED officials seek 10 days custody, claims Soren knowingly used crime proceedings. Supreme Court to hear his plea challenging arrest tomorrow. Hours after Varanasi court ordered the unsealing of a Gyanvapi mosque basement, puja performed in the mosque complex. Muslim side appeals to the High Court. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal to lead protests in Chandigarh over alleged rigging in the mayoral polls. This on the same day as his 5th ED summon in the liquor gate probe tomorrow. Uttarakhand government to get the Uniform Civil Code draft tomorrow. The draft bill will then be presented by the Dhami government in the State Assembly on the 5th of February. Karnataka Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivkumar's brother D.K. Suresh triggers a row after calling for a separate country for South India. BJP hits out, claims Congress is practicing divide and rule politics. Tractors line up the streets of Brussels as farmers surround the EU Parliament. Farmers' protests rage across France, Germany, Italy, Poland and Hungary. But first to the breaking news at this hour, 24 hours on, no Chief Minister for Jharkhand. That's right, that's the big story that's coming in at the moment. The Jharkhand governor is yet to invite Champai Soren to form a government. 39 Jharkhand MLAs flown out to Hyderabad. The JMM Congress MLAs are now on board an aircraft to Hyderabad. Champai Soren says the governor will take a decision soon. But clearly the governor is keeping the JMM waiting, which is why the MLAs are being flown to Hyderabad amidst fears that they could be poached. So lots of dramatic developments now taking place at the moment in Jharkhand. Joining us now are our correspondents in different parts. Shreya is in Ranchi, Apurva is in Hyderabad and Preeti Chaudhary is here in New Delhi. First,